Welcome back. Now to our next conversation. The federal government has been commended for signing the Petroleum Industry Act. There have been many rounds of applause to the present administration, as many believe that it will open windows of opportunities in the oil and gas industry with renewed optimism for increased inflows of investment, revenue generation boost, and job opportunities. Well, we have Mr. Chinwedu Enechi, Associate Director, Oil and Gas and Power, Anderson, to share his thoughts on this. Great to have you on the program. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, so the 3% revenue allocation to host communities in one area, which seems, unresolved, even after the bill has become an act. How do you see this actually being resolved going forward?
Well, for me, looking at the issue, the law has been signed. So I guess the aggrieved parties will then need to engage the government and see what can be done. Obviously, when you look at that region, they've been clamoring for more. A party said 5%, and then another party said 2.5%. And what happened was that we reached a compromise of 3%. And mind you, we also have the 13% derivation that also goes to that region. So I think the focus should really be what is going to be done with the fund. When you look at the Petroleum Industry Act, good enough, what we have is that you're going to have a host community development trust that's going to have participants from the local communities as members of the board. So essentially, they're going to determine what that fund is going to be used for and how the fund will be used. So yes, the issue in terms of what percentage to apply may continue, but I think the focus right now should be how do we even ensure that whatever fund that is contributed into that trust is actually used for what it ought to be used for. Essentially, what you have in the Act is 75% put aside for capital projects. And then you have 20% for as reserve fund, and then 5% for administrative costs. So I think when you look at what the Act is trying to do is essentially trying to make sure that rather than have a situation where you have government appointees and several people determining what the fund should be used for, now you have a situation where you're going to have members of that community taking part in decision making as to how that fund should be used for a developmental project. So, like I said, I think the parties can, continue to engage the government to see whether more can be allocated to that. But for now, we have a law, and we know how long it's taking us to get here. And so, asking for more for now or getting more for now may not be an easy task, given how long it's taking us even to arrive at where we are.
Well, but there are some concerns that the Frontier Exploration Fund is actually too big, considering the challenges we have in Nigeria. What do you think?
Well, for me as a tax consultant, I like to stay away from political arguments. Yes, there are parties who will say that the amount being allocated to Frontier Fund is quite large. But I guess the government has intention why that is being done. The whole essence is to see how you can develop the frontier region and the deep offshore. Obviously, if you look at what is happening right now, you realize that with what you have in the Act, a lot of incentive has been given to that area to see how you can encourage crude production from the frontier region and push investors to that area to see how much of development crude development can happen in that region. And to be fair and to be true to ourselves, in the near future, most of our crude production is going to come from the deep offshore and the frontier region. Now, I think the question then is, with the funds being allocated to that region, be really used for what it is meant to be used for? I think that's another question. And I will leave that to the politicians to decide whether how that would be put.
Okay. Well, the steering committee has 12 months before implementation. What should the members be doing within this 12 months? And what should Nigerians be preparing for ahead of the implementation?
Thank you for that question. I think, first of all, what we need to look at is where we are. where we are in terms of the current, I shouldn't say the current act, the Petroleum Profit Tax Act that we had up until, this law was signed. I think if you look at how we then transition from where we currently are to where we want to be in terms of really implementing the law. Obviously, you're going to have some provisions of the law that you'll be asking yourself, should we begin to apply immediately, or should we give a room for operators to run their business up until the end of the year? So I think the steering committee really needs to engage the stakeholders, which is the oil and gas players, to say, okay, how do we transition everybody into the new law? But that is going to give you first of all, you need to understand where we are, what happens with the current law that we currently use, and how we then move people from the PPTA or the Petroleum Act to the new Petroleum Industry Act. So a lot of engagement needs to happen between the steering committee and the industry players, so that everyone is carried along in terms of implementation of the act.
All right, from your perspective, what's the plan here in the act for subsidy?
Well, the subsidy issue is usually, the conversation is that subsidy is going to eventually be removed. Because if you have a situation where we're not able to enjoy the benefit of increased crude oil price because we're paying subsidy, the whole essence is that you want to have a situation where subsidy is completely taken out. Unfortunately, the law doesn't make any specific provision with respect to removal of subsidy. But I guess the government is playing along or having other conversation around that. Look at what the NNPC was saying some months ago, looking at how much subsidy is costing the government. Obviously, sooner rather than later, we're going to get to the point where Nigerians begin to pay for petroleum product, the actual price. But the law, as it is now, doesn't make specific provision with respect to subsidy. But I think looking at what NNPC is doing and how the NNPC is going to be structured with a commercial orientation and no recourse to government funding, obviously it pays them more to get to the point where you're not having to fund the additional cost of bringing refined production into the country.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. That subsidy matter, I know it's going to form a lot of conversations in the nearest future until we know for sure what the government and the NNPC decides to do. Thank you so much, Mr. Chiwendu Inechi, the Associate Director, Oil, Gas and Power at Anderson, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.